All right, so when you're answering the questions for vertex and focus, remember they're order pairs. When you're writing the answers for directrix and axis of symmetry, they're equations. It's going to be x equals or y equals depending on each equation. So let me go through. I'm going to do the odds. So for the first one, remember whenever you're trying to graph the parabola, you need to make sure your x squared or your y squared term is isolated. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this problem. I'm going to divide both sides by 3 in order to isolate my x squared term, and then I get 4/3 y. Remember, this is in the form, or the equation, the standard form of x squared equals 4py. So remember, right here, this number in front of the non-squared variable is what 4p equals. So I'm going to take 4p, I'm going to set it equal to 4/3. What I'm doing here now to solve for p is I'm going to divide both sides by 4. And remember, dividing by 4, when you're having a fraction involved, it's like multiplied by the reciprocal. So really what I'm doing here is multiplying both sides by 1/4. If you'd rather put 1 under the 4p and solve it as a proportion, you can do that as well. But here this would cancel, and then now you're left with p is equal to, and I could simplify this diagonally, and then your p-value is 1/3. Next, what I need to do is take that p-value, and remember the p-value is the distance from your vertex to the focus and the distance from the vertex to the directrix. Notice that there's nothing being added or subtracted here to your x squared and your y. So this tells me my vertice or my vertex is going to be located at 0, 0. So I could put my dot right there at 0, 0. So then next what I'm going to find is my focus. So what I need to do here is, because my vertex was at 0, 0, I already know that I'm going to put that p-value in the non-squared variable spot. And my non-squared variable was y. So my order pair for my focus is just going to be 0, p, and that focus point is going to be 0, 1/3. And then for the directrix, it's the opposite of p. So for the directrix, and again, non-squared variable, and it's an equation. So my non-squared variable was y, and then it's the opposite of p. So y equals negative 1/3 is my equation for the directrix. Remember, your axis of symmetry is that imaginary line that goes through that vertex. So my axis of symmetry here is going to be x equals 0. Because what it is it's this imaginary line through here. Let me go ahead and graph my focus. So my focus here is, and I'm going to approximate it, so it's like 1/3. Let me just put the dot right there. And then my directrix, remember, the directrix and the focus are both the same distance away from that vertex. And then that would be your directrix, and then you can just make your parabola. Remember, it surrounds the focus. Okay, so for number 3, remember, isolate the square term first. So let me go ahead and rewrite my equation here. All right, number 3, let me rewrite the equation. It's got negative and then parenthesis y plus 3 squared equals 3 parenthesis x minus 2. So this one, it's got something added or subtracted to that x and y. So this is a clue that your vertex is not going to be at 0, 0. However, remember, step number 1, isolate the square term. So notice this has got an assumed negative 1 there. So I have to divide both sides of my equation by negative 1 to get this y plus 3 squared all by itself. This is going to now change my 4p value and the direction of my parabola. So let me go ahead and pull out the vertex first. Remember, K is always with Y, H is always with X, and when you go to pull it out, backwards of what you think. So when we pull this out, the 2 is positive, the 3 is negative. Next, I'm going to find my p-value. And remember, the p-value is found by setting this number here, which is 4p, equal to it. So now I'm going to divide by 4, and p is equal to negative 3/4. I'm going to use this p-value to find my focus and my directrix. Now, for this problem, when the vertex is not at 0, 0, we actually have to use the center point, or the vertex that we found. We can't just put 3/4 into our focus and our directrix and say that's our answer. So what I'm going to do now, for my focus, I'm going to look to see which variable was not squared, and the variable that wasn't squared is the x. And remember, with the x is the h. So I'm going to take h, and then I'm going to do plus or minus p, plus p, comma, k. And this is going to give me my focus. So my h of my vertex was 2. My p-value is negative 3/4, and the k of my vertex was negative 3. I need to do the math there of 2 plus negative 3/4. Now remember, WebAssign wanted your answers as improper fractions. Because you're graphing it, you might want to make it a mixed number. I'll accept it either way. So to do the math here, I could change the whole number 2 and make it 8/4 so it has a common denominator. And then I can combine my numerators and I get 5/4, and then the k would stayed the same. So I would also accept 1 1/4, comma, negative 3. This is your focus point. Next, we have to do the directrix. So for the directrix, still the variable that's not squared. So for this one, again, my variable that was not squared is going to be x. But this time, we're going to take that h and we're going to subtract the p. So for the focus, we add the p, and for the directrix, we subtract the p, or add the opposite of p, however you want to think of it. So here, my h value was 2. My p value is negative 3/4, but I'm subtracting it. So in this particular problem, it actually becomes 2 plus 3/4, and then my directrix equation is 2 3/4. If you wanted to make it improper, it would be 11/4. My axis of symmetry, my AOS, this is going to be y equals negative 3. So let's go ahead and put all of this on the graph. Graph my vertex first. So my vertex was positive 2, negative 3. My axis of symmetry, remember, is this imaginary line that's going to go through that vertex. It's a y squared, so I know it's going to be the c or the backwards c. And then let me go ahead and put in my directrix, which is going to be 2 3/4. So like around here. And then my focus point was 1 1/4, comma, negative 3. So about there. And then remember, the parabola surrounds it. So for right now, you don't have to do the calculation for the x-intercept. Just show me how the parabola surrounds that focus and that the directrix is behind it. On the test, I will expect you to find additional points and then use the axis of symmetry to get the other side of the parabola. Okay, so remember, to figure out which way your parabola is going to face, remember when it's the y squared equation, that's going to be the c if the number in front of the non-squared variable is positive. So basically your p-value positive. And then when it's y squared, if your p-value is negative, then it's the backwards c. Then for the x squared equation, then it'll be the u when p is positive, and then upside down u when your p-value is negative. So you're going to look to see what number's in front of that non-squared variable. And that's what I'm talking about, the positive and the negative. Okay, so this is an ellipse. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull out my center point. And remember, H is always with X, K is always with Y. Again, backwards of what you think. So when I go to pull this out, it's 2, -5 is going to be my center point. Next thing I'm going to do is look for my a squared. A squared is always the bigger denominator. So my bigger number is 16. So now I'm going to square root it to get my a value, and it's positive and -4. My b value, or b squared, is the smaller of the two denominators, which is the 9. So then b is equal to positive and -3 after I square root it. Next, I need to find my c value for the focus. And remember, the formula you're memorizing is c is equal to a squared minus b squared. Fill in your a squared, which was 16, your b squared, which was 9. Let's go ahead and subtract them, and then square root it. Now for the radicals, when you list the focus, I want it with radicals. But for graphing, you'll have to approximate this. For example, if I needed to approximate the square root of 7, that square root is in between the perfect square of 4 and 9. So we could already see that the square root of 7 is going to be a number between 2 and 3. And that's where you're going to put your dot, between 2 and 3. I don't care if it's closer to 2 or closer to 3. Just get it in the general area. It looks like it's closer to 9. So maybe it's 2.6. Again, we're just going to approximate. Now let's go back and let's use our A, B, and C values now to find our vertices, co-vertices, and focus, or foci. So for the vertices, we're going to still need to incorporate that center point, but what I'm going to do is wherever a squared was located, that's where I'm adding the a. You see how a squared was under x squared? So when I go to take my h and k, I'm going to add my a value to the variable it was under. And you see how it was under x squared, so that's where I'm adding the a. So for my vertice here, I'm going to take 2, subtract 4, comma, -5, -2, -5 is my first vertice, and then I got to add it now. So 2 plus 4, comma, -5. I'm adding the a to the variable it was under. So my a squared was under x squared, so that's why I'm adding it to the x of the center. So then 6, -5 is my other vertex. Now, on the quiz, I'm not going to ask you to list the co-vertices, but you need to find them in order to graph it. So you need to know how wide to make this ellipse. So for this one, for the co-vertices, since I added A to the H, I'm going to add B to the K. So whatever you didn't add it to, so I'm going to take my K and add and subtract B to it. So then my first one, so it'll be 2, and then -5 minus 3. So 2 comma -8 and then 2 comma negative 5 plus 3, so 2, negative 2. These are my co-vertices. And now let's do the focus points. And again, when you list them on the line, I want them in radical form, not the approximated decimal. So the same place you added A, the red writing, that's where you're adding C as well. So for the foci, H plus or minus C, comma K. So whatever you did with the A, add it to the same thing you did for the C. So then my H was 2, and then I'm going to okay, so then this is comma K, and K was negative 5. This is how you're writing it. If you want to put plus minus, that's fine, or you can write them individually. And these are your focus points. I don't want to see the approximated decimal when you write it on the line. Leave it in radical form. So now let's get these 7 points and put them in the graph. Okay, so for the center, let's do that one first. So that's going to be positive 2, negative 5. Then I'm going to do my 2 vertices, which were negative 2, negative 5, 2, negative 5, and then positive 6, negative 5. These are my vertices. And then the 2 co-vertices I found were 2, negative 8, and 2, negative 2. So right now we could just connect it and get the ellipse shape, and then we'll add back in the focus. And again, you're going to approximate them. So for this one, remember we said the square root of 7 was about 2.6. So 2 minus 2.6, which will be about, you could even do 0.5. Again, we're trying to get it in between the 2 appropriate numbers. And then here, 2 plus 2.6, so 4.6 comma negative 5. So these would be approximately where I'm going to put my 2 points. So I'll do them in purple, so about 4.6. And then the other one I had gotten was like negative 0.6. So maybe there. And just remember, the location of the red dot and the purple dot, they need to be spaced about the same distance apart. Okay, so you see how this is about the same size apart as this one. So once you figure out where one of them is going to go, just put the other one on the other side by the other vertice, the same space away. When you're writing the equations for the parabola or the ellipse, what I recommend you do is give yourself a visual. However, remember, whenever you see a 0 in any of the order pairs for the focus or the directrix, that could be a clue that your center is going to be 0, 0, or your vertex is 0, 0. But let's give ourselves a visual on number 9. So I'll do my X and my Y axis. I'm going to graph my focus. It's going to be here at 0, 2, or 2, 0. And then my directrix is at X equals negative 2. So here would be my directrix. Now, remember, your vertex is the midpoint of those, or right smack in the middle of the focus and the directrix. So you can see that it's going to be 0, 0. So this tells me, and notice the focus and the directrix are both sitting on the x-axis. So this tells me that my graph is going to be surrounding this way. So it's going to be the y-squared equation that I'm filling in. So because it's at 0, 0, what I'm filling in is this equation. I just need to find the p-value. And the p-value is how far away is the blue dot from the purple? You can see it's 2 space away. Or you could have done blue to green. It's still 2 space away. Has to be the same. So then all I have to do now is fill in 2 for p, multiply 4 and 2, and my equation, y squared equals 8x. As soon as you give yourself the visual and you see, is it the C, the backwards C, the U, the upside down U, that'll tell you which equation you're filling in. All right, so for number 11, here we go. Notice my focus is at 3, -2, and my directrix is at 5. So let's go ahead and give yourself the visual. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So here is my focus point. And then my directrix is at x equals 5. So 4, 5. And here's my directrix. Remember that your vertex is in the middle of these two. So I know that my vertex is going to be right here in the middle, because this is one space away here and one space away here. If you wanted to do the midpoint formula, you could. But if you give yourself the visual, you could just, as long as it's nice and neat, you can find it. So my vertex here, so my p-value is 1. However, actually, it's going to be -1, because remember your parabola surrounds the vertex. So whenever it's backwards, make that p-value negative. Now, my vertex point, this dot right here, is going to be the order pair 4, -2. This is my H, this is my K. So because it's the C, it's the y² equation. Let's write down what we're filling in. So because it's the backwards C, I'm filling in this equation. So let's fill it in. So my K value was -2. So really what went in here, negative, negative, it turns positive. And then 4, my P value was -1. And then x minus 4. So all I have to do here is multiply that 4 and -1. And here's your equation. And you're done. So again, I'm going to give myself a visual. So I have vertices at 0, 5 and 0, -5. And then I got focus points on 0, 3 and -3. So you can already see that the center is going to be the midpoint of the focus and the midpoint of the vertices. And you can see that that center point is going to be 0, 0 here. And you see how they're all lined up on the y-axis? So that tells you a² goes under y². So wherever they're lined up, either parallel to the y-axis or parallel to the x-axis, then you'll know where to put the bigger number. All right, so, and you could also see on this one, you see where the 5 and the 3 are? They're in the y spot. So let's fill it in. So what we're filling in here is x², and then it gets the b², and then y² over the a². Now, in order to find my a value, remember a is the distance from the center to the vertice, and that's going to be 5. And again, also remember it's right here, plus or minus a, and then this is plus or minus c when the center is at 0, 0. So I need to find b though. So I got to do c² equals a² minus b². So c was 3, a is 5. Square them, subtract them, and I get -16 equals -b², divide by -1. So b² is 16. So my equation, x² over 16 plus y² over 25. Okay, so for the last question, we're going to write an equation of an ellipse. I'm going to give myself a visual. I'm going to go ahead and graph my foci. It's going to be the order pair 0, 2, 0, -2. Remember, the major axis length is equal to 2 times a. So divide, and my a value is 3. Now, I can also see here that the midpoint between the two focus points is the order pair 0, 0. So that's my center. So my C value is the distance between the center and the foci. So C is equal to 2. So a squared is equal to 3 squared, c squared is 2 squared, and now to find b squared, I'm going to do a squared, c squared equals a squared minus b squared. So I'll fill in what they've given me. I'm going to subtract. -5 equals -b squared, divide, and b squared equals +5. Now notice my foci were vertical, so this tells me my a squared needs to be under y squared. So x squared, and it's going to get the b squared, y squared will get the a squared, and you set it equal to 1. And that's your last equation.